trade today. That's what it's all about. We're considering entering a trade today. You might log into your trading platforms at the end of today's trade chat and enter a trading instruction. So we're considering entering a trade here on the 40-day cycle. Now the 40-day cycle is going to go up for roughly half the cycle and then come down for roughly half the cycle. So we're looking at entering a trade which might span a period of time from tomorrow for about the next 2 or 3 weeks. Okay, that's sort of roughly the time span that we're talking about in terms of taking the trade. So during that time span, when price is going to be affected by many different cycles, what is the 80-day cycle going to be doing? Well, the 80-day cycle, of course, experienced a trough here in early March, and it rises until about halfway through the cycle, and then it falls to the next cycle trough, which is expected on this date. So what is it going to be doing during the period of time in which we are going to be trading? Well, it will have turned down, and it will be pushing prices downwards. Your 80-day cycle, the next cycle up from your trading cycle, is pushing cycles down. Okay, that's very important. When you're considering taking a trade on the 40-day cycle, it's very important what the 80-day cycle is doing. If the 80-day cycle is pushing downwards in price, then generally you're going to end up with a cycle that has a bit of a bearish shape. I'll explain that in a moment. So that's the 80-day cycle. What's the next longer cycle? The next longer cycle is the 20-week cycle. So the 20-week cycle also experienced a trough in early March, and it is going to be going up for roughly half the cycle, and then it will be turning down. So is it going to be doing for the period of time in which we're going to be taking our trade? Most people would say it's going to be going up. Okay, and it does look as though it should be going up. However, we have several cyclic tools at our disposal so that we can be a little more accurate about working out what that cycle is actually doing at the moment. Where is the 20-week cycle? Let's take a look at it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. If I plot, first of all, semicircles, okay, the obvious answer to what the 20-week cycle is doing is to look at the semicircle for tomorrow and say, okay, well, the semicircle is pointing up. Okay, semicircle is pointing up. That means that the 20-week cycle is still pushing up. All right. However, that's only a sort of a rough initial approach. We have finer tools at our disposal for working out whether the 20-week cycle has already experienced a peak or not. Okay, so we expect that the 20-week cycle is going to be going up, but is it? And how do we know when the 20-week cycle has already experienced a peak and is turning down? We know that because of when it crosses an FLD. And for those of you who are beginners, I'm venturing into slightly advanced territory here. I apologize for that, but I know we have many experienced people who I hope will be enjoying this part of the discussion. How do we know when the 20-week cycle has actually turned down? Well, when the 20-week cycle crosses below the 20-week FLD, that is evidence that the 20-week cycle has experienced a peak. Has it crossed below that FLD? I'm displaying the FLD now. That's that green line. That's the 20-week FLD. When price crosses below there, then that is evidence that the 20-week cycle has already experienced a peak, which means that the 20-week cycle has turned down and is pushing the market downwards and is no longer pushing the market upwards. Okay, so it looks, I think you will agree, as if though the price has crossed that FLD. It's what I describe as flirting with that FLD line. How do we tell whether it has actually crossed that 20-week FLD? What we do is we plot the chart as a line on median chart, and you can see that in fact price has come very close to that 20-week FLD. It is in fact touching it today. And if price hadn't bounced up today to the extent that it did, then it would have crossed below that 20-week FLD. So price has not quite crossed below that 20-week FLD. But if price does not over the next week, the median price does not remain above that FLD, then price will cross it. You should never really anticipate price crossing an FLD, so it's foolish for me to even discuss that. The situation at the moment is the price has not crossed below the 20-week FLD. So in terms of the FLD, we cannot say that the 20-week cycle has peaked. However, you will know if you happen to be on Trader Chat yesterday, or if you're reading my ST Outlook market commentary that we post every week, you'll know that the American markets price has crossed below the 40. What's crossed below? It's crossed below the 20-week VTL, therefore confirming the position of a 20-week and a 40-week cycle peak in the American markets. As an Australian, it would be foolish to ignore that. It would be foolish to ignore the fact that the American markets have confirmed their 20-week cycle peaks. So although price has not yet crossed below this 20-week FLD, it's very close. And because the American markets have confirmed the position of the peak, I think there's a very good chance that, in fact, the peak of the 20-week cycle is already in place. What are the other tools that we can use? Well, we can also use a VTL, of course. Let's just plot the VTLs. You will see that price has not crossed below the 20-week VTL or the 80-day VTL. Let's just have a look at all of them. There we go. It hasn't crossed below the 80-day VTL or the 40-day VTL. It has crossed below the 20-day VTL, confirming that the 40-day cycle has experienced a peak. Well, that's no big news to us. We know that the 40-day cycle is approaching a trough. It possibly formed that trough yesterday. So it's no big news to us that price crossed the 20-day VTL. So there's not really much point in displaying that. So to sort of wrap things up, in terms of making a trading decision today on the basis of this analysis, what is our trading decision? Well, we're trading the 40-day cycle, or at least I'm going to be talking about trading the 40-day cycle throughout these trader chats. And the 40-day cycle is approaching or has probably experienced a trough, has possibly experienced a trough yesterday. Price is now bouncing out of that 40-day cycle trough. Does that mean that we should rush out and buy the Australian market? Well, I would say no. First of all, because there are two longer cycles pushing down. That means that the next 40-day cycle is likely to have a bearish shape. Okay. Now, your average shape, if I could draw some possible potential cycle shapes, your average cycle shape is what I describe as an M shape. Okay, and it looks a bit like that. So that's your average cycle shape. A bearish cycle shape is a cycle that doesn't go up that much, then comes down possibly a bit lower, doesn't even achieve a higher peak on the second peak, and then comes down even lower. That's a bearish cycle shape. I believe that the 40-day cycle that is about to occur in the Australian market is probably going to have a bearish shape because of those two longer cycles pushing down. So I would say no, don't buy the Australian market at the moment if you're trading the 40-day cycle. I would caution against it. Even if you are an experienced trader and you're willing to only look at the two longer cycles, the 80-day cycle and the 20-week cycle, I think there's a good chance that the 80-day cycle is almost certainly pushing down on price, and there's a good chance that the 20-week cycle has already experienced a peak, which was this peak over here, and therefore the 20-week cycle is also pushing down on price. And so, in fact, we're looking at a fairly bearish period over the next 40-day period. So, to sort of bring it all together, what am I proposing you enter into your trading platforms this evening? I'm suggesting you don't enter anything in terms of trading the 40-day cycle. if you're trading the Australian market generally. Why? Well, because the 40-day cycle looks as though it has just or is about to experience a 40-day cycle trough, which means the 40-day cycle is going to cause price to bounce a little bit out of that trough, but it's going to be a bearish cycle because of the longer cycle still pushing down, and so I would not consider entering a long trade at the moment. Would I consider entering a short trade? Well, not yet. Steady on there. I would certainly consider entering a short trade a little later in the 40-day cycle, but certainly not today. Before I consider entering a short trade in the 40-day cycle, I would wait for price to bounce out of that trough to confirm the position of the trough, and then we would start looking at possible places to enter a short trade on this 40-day cycle, which is developing at the moment. And very possibly in next week Oz Trader Chat, we might be doing that. We might be looking out for a potential opportunity to enter short in the Australian market. But of course, it's very important to understand that although I'm saying today that potentially next week we're going to start looking at entering a short trade, it's very important to understand that an analysis according to cyclic principles is all about analyzing the markets constantly as new data is available to us. Every day at the end of trading, there is new data available, and the analytical situation needs to be reanalyzed every single day. It's quite possible that next week we're going to come back. Something might have happened in the market which has caused us to reanalyze the situation and to be making very different types of decisions. Although in my experience, that's not very often the case. Generally, the markets tend to play the Hurst game very well, and analyzing the markets using Hurst cyclic principles gives one a very clear insight into which way we expect the markets to unfold. So that brings to an end what I plan to speak about in today's Trader Chat. If you have any questions, I'll be delighted to answer them, do my best to answer them. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for your interest in Sentient Trader. Thank you for being with us today, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Now, I'm not sure whether there is an Oz Trader Chat next week because I'm going to be traveling, but we will be confirming whether or not there will be an Oz Trader Chat next week. We will be confirming that by email, and so thank you very much for your time. I do hope